Okay, so I don't really make too many Winnipeg Jets videos on this channel, mostly because I leave all that stuff to Peg City Hockey, and he does a great job going over Winnipeg news and stories and whatnot. But either way, I'm only making this video because it really surprises me. I saw this on Frank Seravalli on Daily Faceoff, the Twitter account right here, and on their episode of the Daily Faceoff show on February 16th, they discussed at length what trade chips the Winnipeg Jets have ahead of the deadline. Now, I'll leave a link in the description to the video. It's on Twitter. Go ahead and watch this if you want. But a quote from Frank that is actually mentioned in this video, and by the way, it's Frank Seravalli, so this is a legit NHL insider. He said that a lot of rumblings have been started over the past few weeks that this could be Mark Scheifele's last season with the Jets. Now, that right there, this video and me listening to this video, that was the first time that I kind of even conceived the idea that Mark Scheifele, one of the best players in the NHL and top Winnipeg Jets center, would be on the move. Now, he's signed till 2024 at $6.125 million a season, and if Frank Seravalli is saying, okay, some believe this could be the last season of Scheifele in Winnipeg, then it implies a trade, does it not? Furthermore, we had ourselves this article here on the New York Post by Larry Brooks, the complex equation Chris Drury faces as the Rangers approach the trade deadline. In this piece, Brooks goes over a whole bunch of options for the New York Rangers and talks about what they could do to upgrade their team, etc., etc. But he also writes out here, Mark Scheifele, who turns 29 in a month and who has 2 more seasons at an AAV of 6.125, is having a down year in Winnipeg for a club that will probably require a reset. If the Rangers have already used their chips on Miller, they'd pretty much be out of the picture on this one unless they go rogue. Drury does not strike me as an individual, though, who would go rogue. At the end of the article, he does right here as well, it seems to me that if Strome is staying, there is a column A on the menu of March 21 possibilities, but if signs point to Strome fleeing, there instead would be a column B. Let me ask you this one. If Strome is a goner, would it be better for the Rangers to save their assets in order to make a run at one of the young centers around the league, rather than going in on a Mark Scheifele? And so, over the span of a few days, we had started to see more conversations about Mark Scheifele being traded than we've ever seen before, and again, this surprises me, because Mark Scheifele, in my biased Canucks, Canadiens, and Red Wings fan point of view, was always a really great NHL player, one of the top centers in the league, one of the best contracts in the league, based off of the amount of production this guy gets you, as well as, the work ethic and the leadership qualities, all this stuff that Mark Scheifele has brought to the Winnipeg Jets over the years. We know that he's one of the more dedicated guys to his craft. Every time they bring him over onto the All-Star game, they say, okay, this guy loves the game, he talks all the time about other players and how skilled they are, and he wants to improve his own game. He's a guy who loves hockey, right? And those qualities have always made it seem to me like Mark Scheifele is this untouchable saint of a player in Winnipeg. Now again, I might be wrong on that, because I'm just here in Vancouver, I don't really keep up too much with the Jets stuff. Again, it's Peg City Hockey who goes out there and does that. But Mark Scheifele, 84 points, 52 games played as a season high in 2018-19, is still producing pretty well this season. 40 points, 44 games played, on pace for 69 total points in 76 games, which is pretty nice. Now, to be fair, this 69-point pace is on 76 games versus the 63 points he had in 56 games last year. He is technically on a slight decline compared to previous seasons, but there still is a good amount of production coming out of this player. However, you take a look at where the Winnipeg Jets are in the NHL standings right now, and they haven't really been the best when it comes to stringing together wins. They're down there 5th in the Central Division, 6th in the Central Division, behind Dallas, Nashville, St. Louis, Minnesota, and Colorado. They're 5-4-1 in their last 10, and they really haven't been as consistent as you would like them to be in order to make the playoffs and actually show off what it is that they can do. This is a team that, on paper, should be a lot better than we have seen out of them the past few games. Scheifele, Ehlers, Connor, Wheeler, Dubois, all these really nice names on the Winnipeg Jets are supposed to be good enough to carry them forward, but it just hasn't happened that way for Winnipeg this season. Now, for Mark Scheifele in particular, as we said, he is a valuable piece. Like, you don't go out there and just trade away point per game or sub-point per game players who are making only $6-ish million for nothing. And so when you think about the idea of a Mark Scheifele trade, firstly, you have to ask yourself, why would the Winnipeg Jets do this? Well, it's because all the things that we said about Mark Scheifele this season, okay, point production, great, he's still sort of there, he's a little bit lower than he has been before, but he's still producing, and work ethic too. There's a reason why it's labeled out here that Scheifele might be playing his last year in Winnipeg, according to some sources to Frank Seravalli. It's because the way Scheifele has been playing this year doesn't really have that same attitude. It doesn't really have that same sort of engagement that we have seen out of Scheifele in the past. Who knows if he's playing with an injury? Who knows if he's playing with other stuff heavy on his mind? But it's been a pretty growing sentiment over the season that Mark Scheifele, at least to my understanding, has been somewhat disappointing. And so, should the Winnipeg Jets even think about trading this guy like Frank Seravalli is implying, what would that constitute? That would constitute what is said over here in the New York Post article as a pretty blunt change in direction. Whether or not that's a quote-unquote rebuild, if you want to use that word, some of these players that are on the Winnipeg Jets, aside from Blake Wheeler, are still pretty young, like Kyle Connor, Ehlers, Scheifele himself. They're all drafted in the 2010s plus, so they're not necessarily old. It's just if the Winnipeg Jets feel like their system is not working, they have themselves an out, and they can say, okay, well, we'll trade Scheifele for a boatload of stuff. Scheifele is likely worth a package that is probable, if not sort of akin to a Jack Eichel package, in my opinion, if not maybe even a bit more because he's a lot cheaper. If you're able to get yourselves more than one of a really good prospect, a solid pick, as well as a roster player, I think you actually kind of think about that if you're Winnipeg and if you decide that you want to go out there and make this change of direction. So, is New York a team that we think about here? Larry Brooks, of course, brought this up in his own article, but it is kind of dependent on a few other factors. Of course, Ryan Strome, whether or not he resigns and goes back to New York or whether or not he leaves, because of course you still have Zibanejad up there. If Strome does depart the Rangers and you do see New York go out there and try to get themselves another center, we know JT Miller can play center, and that's kind of been one of the bigger conversations over the past few weeks. But Scheifele very well could be a target too, should he actually be on the market and should this Seravalli sentiment actually reign true. Just imagine having Mika Zibanejad and Mark Scheifele playing on the same team. And if you go over to Scheifele and you say, hey, we're sending you over to a team where you're not going to be one of the mainstay, just top-of-the-line guys. In Winnipeg, he was mostly seen as one of the top 2, top 3 best players in the roster. When he had 84 points, he was second on the team behind Wheeler. But if he goes over to New York, all of a sudden there's Zibanejad, there's Panarin, there's Kreider this season especially, my gosh. There's Adam Fox, and I guess there's Igor Shesterkin too. There are so many players on the New York Rangers that you could probably say take the load off, quote-unquote, the responsibilities that a Scheifele would have. Now, that doesn't discredit everything that he has built for himself over the past few years, and the reason I say it like that is because the Scheifele playing around this season versus the Scheifele playing around 2-3 years ago doesn't really look like the same guy. Like, he kind of looks a little less physical, a little less engaged, and a little bit more, dare I say, whiny to the refs this season than he has been in the past few years. So, when it comes to Scheifele, this is sort of the same argument that we have been saying about other players that are getting traded around and that are sort of in a worse position now than they were previously. With Jake Chychrun, you're not trading for a guy who's struggling offensively this year. You're trading for a guy that was the #1 goal guy amongst all defensemen last season. If you're trading for Jeff Petrie, you're not trading for the guy that keeps on shooting it into shin pads on the power play this season. No, you're trading for the guy that got 40 straight points in 4 straight years with a mark of 50-something games played last year. For Scheifele, the idea of even moving away from this guy is Winnipeg going out there and trying to capitalize on what he could be. Trying to capitalize on what Mark Scheifele has done in the past and saying to other teams, hey, you could revive this guy and you could make him what he used to be. And, I mean, even now, he's not really all too bad. He's under a point per game. So there's still a tremendous amount of value for this kind of guy, especially on the cap hit. He's making $6 million-ish until 2024. So, despite all the issues that Winnipeg Jets fans have with this guy, there still are a whole bunch of redeeming qualities that I do think would make him super attractive on the trade market. And so, if Seravalli's going out there and saying, yeah, this might be his last season on the team, maybe next year you're going out there and building purely off of Pierre-Luc Dubois. Who really knows? So talk to me in the comments, what do you think? If you're a Winnipeg Jets fan, what are your opinions about Mark Scheifele, whether or not he could be traded? Frank Saravalli is saying he might be, so that's why I'm making this video. Again, it surprised me that I'm even making it, but I felt like this needed to be said. I hope you enjoyed this video, Trolls 99, and bye.